Hello and welcome back to the Comfort Zone podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about situations, stories, events, and experiences where we have gone out of their comfort zone in a comfortable environment. And today we have a very special guest, Daniel Catalan, aka Dan the Resume Man.
Hi,
Welcome.
hi, April.
So,
Thank you for having me.
thank you for joining. I don't know if you guys know me or if you follow me on TikTok, maybe you've seen me talk about him during my trying to find a job, trying to be an adult in Madrid era. But Dan is very well known in the auxiliares community, in the expat community in Madrid for helping people really level up their resume. And I have to say, right after I did your workshop, I copy pasted everything that you told me to do for my resume onto my LinkedIn. And I just kept getting like messages. People were actually responding to my applications. Recruiters were reaching out to me. And I was like, what is this? What is going on? And I think like one of the things that you do so well is you're able to like, I don't know, the way you write and the way you like level up our our resumes like triggers the SEO, I guess, and like LinkedIn, but I have to say I'm eternally grateful to Dan because without his help, I wouldn't have landed the job that I have now. So, round of applause. Woo! Um, but before we get into the whole resume, Dan the Resume Man, I wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself. Who is Daniel Catalan? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And kind of like, how did you get to the place where you are now?
That's a good question. Brilliant. Well, we can just dive right in. I'm from upstate New York. I lived in the U.S. until I was 20, mostly in like Northeast U.S. My parents immigrants, and they like taught me to be really hardworking and diligent. I always took a knack for writing. My mom, from a really early age, because she's a doctor but also a medical writer and editor, she just recognized that writing, like I had potential with writing when also no other hobby or extracurricular really sparks a lot of joy in me. So I just like went all in on writing and with writing workshops, that studied literature in undergrad. And then I actually graduated from undergrad really young. I was 20. So I wasn't ready to join the conventional workforce in the US at 20. So I did what a lot of people in our community have done, which is go to Madrid to be an auxiliar. So one of the auxiliar programs, it was a beta, and then ultimately I immediately knew that I wasn't gonna go back to the U.S. Like I really was into the vibe of Madrid and just in general Europe, and being
Mhm.
able to take inexpensive flights to go to different places. I made a lot of friends. The first several years in Madrid, the 2 years as an aux, then 2 years teaching business lessons, I used a lot of the free time to write articles about just my life or my travels, or then it gradually transitioned because I got tired of writing about myself, because also I didn't think anybody really wants to read about that, to write about people that I met or businesses or artists or creatives or just anything, because you meet so many cool people living abroad. So my
Mhm.
focus became writing about other people. And then there I hit a ceiling of, okay, like I could write all these things for free or for smaller amounts or low amounts of money, or I could get a more formal education and then just go even harder at it. So after 4 years in Madrid, I did like a master's in global communications at the American University of Paris in Paris. And there
Wow.
I took a lot of courses on like branding, on like different types of digital media. A lot of what I teach to the clients about how to make their LinkedIn profile perfect, even though now the lessons are a little bit outdated, the foundations came from a course about just using social media to further your like
Mhm.
hireability. One of my mentors in that course, her name is Christy Shields. She taught a course called Food, Culture, and Communications. She's one of the world's leading experts on Comté cheese, which is a cheese made sort of on a region of France called the Jura on the border of France and Switzerland. So would, as a part of that course, we were 6 students that accompanied her to her research site to just talk to all the cheesemakers and everyone involved in the branding and supply chain of this cheese. And it's delicious cheese. It's amazing. And this region, beautiful nature. So part of that trip was speaking with everyone in her network and then
Mhm.
quickly writing down everything that they told us about their process, their lives, and then the region and the cheese, and just everything we needed to know to support Professor Shields' research. So that also got my gears going of, okay, like while I'm talking to someone, I could write in the same moment, and that could actually be used as research, like the account transmitted, like because it's written in the moment. So I didn't know yet that that would evolve into writing resumes for people, but I was very good at it. So I just knew that something connected with speaking with people, taking notes, like would be my job. So then after I moved back to Madrid and lived there again, I worked at IE Business School as one of the jobs in that period. And that's where I got the idea to write resumes for people, because I saw that, okay, people will spend a lot of money on an MBA or an experience just for that experience to be one line item of their CV or resume and on their LinkedIn profile. But how then would they pay a reasonable amount for knowing that the thing is well written if they're a non-native English speaker, or if they're a native English speaker and just struggle with it like everyone does? This is the one type of product that everyone needs to buy at some point or do themselves. Basically, I mean, most people do it themselves and don't even realize it's an option to pay someone to do it for them. So I went all in on creating a process where I interview every client and write their new CV or resume for them in real time. And then also, if they want it as well as an extra service, teach them how to curate their LinkedIn profile or write cover letters for them or coach them to rehearse for the interviews. And then from the moment I introduced that service to the international community in Madrid, my schedule was fully booked. This was before the pandemic.
Wow.
It really popped off. I was really well received. But then when I started doing it remotely as well, people from various areas of my life, because of traveling and meeting so many people and being an active social media user, kept resurfacing. So my entire network of immediate people I knew, or people 1 degree of separation away, were the foundation in the first year. Then the pandemic starts. Suddenly everyone needs a service like this. And then in the pandemic as well, like I went viral on Reddit twice for this.
Really?
So that made me visible to people all over the world in areas of the world that I wouldn't have ever been able to reach. And then the clients now are from every walk of life, every industry, and every like level of society, like from literally like the CTO of a Saudi bank, the CTO of a major network of art galleries was one recently. So from these high level people, like even employees of Reddit, employees of LinkedIn, so tech, and these are like the high earners, but then also like peers and like people from the various communities I've lived. Like I work with a lot of Portuguese people here in Porto. Like I've worked with a lot, like the map just is most of the world basically. And it's been really exciting because then I meet people that I never would have met under different circumstances. We strike up little friendships. Something that happens now is if I'm traveling, because I love Anthony Bourdain, if I'm traveling, I would contact, if I have a client and we end up talking naturally as if we would be friends, I put a little note in their file. And then if it's ever possible to meet them, like if I'm traveling and they live in the city that I'm going to, I will contact them. That's happened more than definitely 20, 30 times. And even now in Madrid or Porto or Berlin, I'm even recognized in the street as Dan the Resume Man. So in Berlin, which is a massive city where I just visit all the time to make my ads, I've never lived there. Recently, I was walking with a friend and a woman recognized me in the street. And I knew who she was too, because it crossed my mind. Like I knew that she lived in Berlin, but she flagged me down. And I had to tell the friend I was with, I swear this is not an actress. This is a real thing that's happening. And same thing once at a wine shop in Porto, a woman recognized me because she paid for me to help her daughter. So
that's amazing. So
now
you're global.
Yeah, it's been global. It's felt global the whole time, but it feels even more so because the main challenge actually is that these sessions are 90 minutes and then they could take longer or be shorter. Okay. But usually they go 90 minutes or slightly less, or if we need more time, more. But ultimately, on a day where I'm fully booked, I have to change my personality a million times over because I'm still the same person doing the same job. But a millennial who just got laid off and has some rage wants a different form of treatment than a Gen Z who needs to be encouraged and who's entering the workforce, or a C-level person who wants to skip the small talk and just dive in. And some people also do want the small talk and the experience of like, I have a very comforting, nice, like I know they like my personality, whatever, but like some people want the personality bit and other people just want like they say the thing and I translate it immediately into the jargon. And that's the process. They tell me about their life, they tell me about their career, and I take it and turn it back into the corporate sounding language, but in a way that doesn't sound tacky and tells a story. So it's using the jargon in a way to tell a neat story that makes sense to a technical reader and a non-technical reader. And the other fun bit, we were talking about this before the call started, before we started the podcast, is I now make these really quirky over-the-top ads that just show my personality so that the types of people that would choose me would sort of understand the type of person that I am, which is like playful and fun. Like the idea here of my branding of this service is that, okay, someone could say, oh, I could just make the resume myself. But then, okay, would that same person cut their own hair? No, you go to a hairdresser or a barber shop, okay? Because you'll always have a blind spot. So, and the idea is if I build the rapport with the client, then every time they need it updated, they just come back the same way you periodically go back to the hairdresser. And we form this relationship over time. And like, I am very invested in the clients. Like they then in turn will tell everyone in their network and everyone in their network. So it's not just the virality of the original Reddit post or of my first wave network. It's that anytime I help someone and they're in a different corner of the world, they then tell everyone in their life to also come to me. So
I think that's like I'm a great example of that because you helped me. And I remember specifically when I reached out to you, I was kind of like in a bit of like despair because I kind of had a job and then that fell through and then I had to go back to Oxing, which I wasn't really happy about. And then I just like wanted to continue to find like applied to places and I wasn't having any luck. And then when I like asked for your service, I was quite frank. I was like, I can't afford it. Can we strike up a deal? And with that deal, I like made some TikTok videos about our sessions. I made some TikTok videos talking about my journey finding a job in Madrid. And literally, you are one of the reasons that I feel like I really like leveled up my LinkedIn game. And because of that, and I told you before this call too, that one video is still getting views today. And that was like 2 years ago. People are still asking about it. People message me like about your services. People ask me like, oh, was this really helpful actually? And I'm like, yeah, because literally, I don't even know how to explain it. Like the week after I applied everything that you helped me with on my resume to my LinkedIn, it was like night and day.
The idea there, I mean, the idea there is that if you have all the descriptions of the actual experience that's so beautiful and eloquent that I write on the resume also in your LinkedIn profile, if someone finds your LinkedIn profile and can read everything they need to know about you, like it's a museum of your career, they can make a good decision about you faster. But then just having the various words connected with the themes and concepts that you work with, like publicly there on display, most people just don't think about their LinkedIn unless they're actively stressed and job seeking. But it's supposed to be set up nicely of, for example, I could write the most beautiful resume in the world for a client, but it'll only ever get seen by people they send it to. But if the description bits are also in your LinkedIn, public for the world to see, someone can find you, learn everything they need to know about you, and make a decision about you earlier in the process. Be like, okay, this is the one that we want to invite for an interview, even before, and then for an opportunity that you didn't even know existed, because they're the ones that find you, which is how you got your job, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think something we spoke about as well back when we made the first videos together was that in Spain, a lot of times like CVs have photos. And I remember specifically you told me.
Oh yeah, I sparred with a girl over that in your video comments. Yeah.
I know.
If a job is posted in English, you don't put a picture, because any company, if it's international or even local and just cares now more about diversity and inclusion, like I don't think Spain wants hanging over it anymore the stereotype about them, which maybe might be racist about them, that they in themselves are racist. Okay, so you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to like perpetuate that more by insisting that there's a picture, right? Where then
Mm-hmm.
the viewer with a bias, before they even read the text, they're influenced and it activates their biases. So you just put the link to your LinkedIn URL in your contact information. So that way, if they want to see what you look like, that's already after they've read enough of the resume and like decide they like take them to the next step of the funnel where they earn the ability to see what you look like, but not just have it be the first. Like, I'm also not saying Spanish people are racist. I'm not saying that they would like, but you just don't want to expose yourself that way so early where it influences whether they put you in the bin immediately or not. The face and age and demographic of the candidate should not be the first thing that is seen. I even, for people that have been out of school for 15 years, I won't put the year they graduated on the CV. You just try to make it so that the person stands on the merit of their achievements. So one girl on the video thread was so
Mm-hmm.
adamant. She's like, no, I've been recruiting for this many years. It's weird to not put the picture back. I'm like, okay, so you probably work in some like not super important company and you're clinging to these old practices just because you don't want to embrace change. So
Honestly,
yeah.
I could not agree with you more because I was so shocked when I saw so many Spanish people with their photos on their resume because I believe in Canada and other parts of the world, it's like
You get put in the bin
illegal.
immediately. Yeah. So I think Spain is like a grace period where maybe they won't put people in the bin for having it for maybe our lifetime because they know they were taught wrong. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe but I feel like an US or company abroad still might have the same portal where you apply in where they would reject the person for having the picture because it does invite some scrutiny. And basically, a rule of thumb is if a job is posted in English, you can assume that they use the modern international system or the US system or the UK system, and that basically you would get like if they have a diversity and inclusion statement on their website, like you don't want to do anything that tickles that. I just started teaching job seeking best practices at the local MBA school, Porto Business School,
Very
where a lot
nice.
of the staff are the same as IE. So they basically, there's a lot of I think there's like some sort of partnership or at least like some sort of similar structure in Porto Business School and IE. But basically, I give this course where then I give the students feedback on their CVs in real time on a smartboard, and the telling them to use the single column template, not use the picture, write in third person. These are all just like things that are second nature to me, but people
Yeah.
need to be taught these things, and until they are taught them, they'll just do it wrong. So, or they'll do it half right. But in a market this competitive, you just have to do everything right. You can't do it half right.
Yeah. And I think like one thing that I really enjoyed about our resume workshop and one thing that I'm constantly in awe is your way of like everything that I think like you mentioned this earlier, treating a Gen Z client different than a millennial client versus maybe a Gen X client or a high level employee or management
Or
client.
the rare like person who jumps from um we're like a Gen X person who got rich immediately from their first endeavor. Like every person is so
Yeah.
different, but the way I engage them, yeah, it is, each one has to be. And
And I think from my experience, I feel like I came into our workshop very insecure, unsure about my qualifications, feeling like a huge imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to be
Mhm.
applying to these jobs when in my brain I feel like I don't deserve it? I didn't study this. But the way we did our workshop and when you started writing my skills out and like putting it on my resume literally like boosted my confidence in such a huge way, which I'm so grateful because I think that's one of your strengths. Like you help people see aspects of their work, career, experiences and skills that maybe they haven't like even thought about.
Yeah.
Um
I mean, that goes back to the haircut thing, that basically you're supposed to leave the haircut or hair salon appointment feeling glamorous and more confident and empowered. So that's like part of what people are paying for, just like look at themselves differently and stand taller. I mean, I also do an assessment of how confident the people are during the call, just so I can get a sense of which ways to uplift them. And I mean, this is like a known thing, but that basically I've noticed that it's true that men will apply for a job if they don't hit most of the requirements, they'll still do it and feel like good about it. And women will self-filter. I'm speaking in broad terms because not all will be like this, but it's a pattern I've noticed. And like I definitely double down on like reminding the women clients to not self-filter, because if anything in your own mind stops you from applying for a job, then they don't even need to reject you. You're like rejecting yourself. So eliminating the weight of that is really important.
I think that is really important. And you mentioned all of the clients that you work with. I was curious to know, what are some of your best and worst experiences?
Okay, that's a good question. So best, I mean, anytime. All right, I'll tell you one. This guy named Jason, he taking the advice that took a life of its own. But basically, and I'm gonna, after you stream the podcast, I'm gonna send this to him. But he basically how do I even start? So he is a SEO writer and expert as his freelance hustle, but he's multi-talented. So he's actually also an actor and a comedian. Like he was an extra on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. He's a comedian, so he's funny. Okay, so he, as SEO writer, actor, comedian, came to me in the pandemic, and we bantered and hit it off really nicely. And then I knew we'd be friends when we would later meet in real life, but basically he took all the advice I gave him, and he used the comedy bits a lot on LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn, if you're funny, you'll just stand out. Okay. So he's really clever, and he makes hilarious LinkedIn posts. But he became the main SEO writer of a prominent baby formula company in the US, and also to other high profile clients. So he got a good outcome, but he's very, very, very visible on LinkedIn with a huge following, because he took the advice I gave him how to use it, but it took a life of its own because of how hilarious this dude is. So then by the time we'd met in real life, one of the times when I went home to visit my family, we just like had a night out together in New York City, and we just hit it off really well as friends. And definitely like that, he's was one of the people that found me from Reddit too. So that's one like nice story of it, because now like if I ever need help with SEO, I turn to him, and I'll just see him every time I go home.
Rapport.
Yeah, more than a rapport. We're friends. We're absolutely friends.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I'm trying to think who else.
For a difficult client, because obviously every time you're client facing, whenever you're providing a service, regardless if you are writing resumes for people, if you're working in Mercadona, you're always going to have to deal with a difficult person. And I wanted to know if you have any stories and how you were able to deal with a difficult client.
All right, I try to give a lot of grace to difficult clients, because if someone's struggling in life and they're not happy, and again, this should happen so much more often. I'm lucky that it doesn't happen as often, but when it does happen, I remember it, and it is annoying. It's if the client has, and this is often from millennials. Okay, so believe it or not, it's not boomers, it's millennials, that they come to me with millennial rage, which means they're not happy with where they are in life. Okay, they view me as an extension of the system that oppresses them. They hate the idea of paying for this, but they still do it anyway. Okay, but so then they just come in a bad mood. And again, I'm not saying millennials in general. I'm saying the handful that have done this happens to be millennials. So they come in a bad mood, then they're short with me, and they just don't, and they're very either nitpicky, or they don't even complain during the call, but then they afterwards are angry. And then it's just that they expect this to be a magic bullet to solve everything for them. And then so it's happened a few times where I've had to like manage people's expectations, where they are rude or after, when they felt entitled to paying for this and actually translating into getting the job right away effortlessly, or they just complain about the process because they don't understand the effort on my side to interview them, where they have to be talkative. They don't understand that my processes work for them, that they're being interviewed and have to like use their like. But one, even in being rude to me, said, I don't like your process because I don't want to tell you what to write. And I'm like, are you joking? Like, you're telling me about your life, and then I'm translating it into the good jargon. But again, this doesn't happen that often. But I do have a process for de-escalating people, and I'll usually offering them more time. But there was one case recently even where the person was so rude and annoying, and honestly, like, I'm not fiending for clients. Like, I'm doing very well. Like, I'm at the highest
Mhm.
tax band a freelancer in Portugal can be in. So that basically, this woman was disrespecting me, and I did not want to give her more time. So I refunded her and said, "Have a nice life. Like, I don't want to deal with
Woo!
you anymore." So,
What a
like,
boss
and I
move.
would do that, and unfortunately, I lost, I think, an hour and a half or 2 hours of my time on that annoying woman. But you just have to sometimes. It's like, but anyway, that happens so rarely. I'd rather tell you a million nice stories about like cool, lovely people, or even something in the middle. My name is popular on a Facebook group of lobbyists in the US. So from that Facebook group, I get really interesting people because I had as a client a lobbyist that defended things I don't agree with, for example, or
Oh.
someone who worked for a consulting firm that also their specific product is something I really don't agree with. But then I still treat those people like anybody else. Those people are actually really polite. Like the people that I would like. So it turns upside down my expectation of
Yeah.
who would disrespect me or who would look at me and be like, oh, like I don't like this person. So it's actually really expanded my horizons that I could deal with people that do business with people that I would never hang out with, right? But
Mhm.
that I would still, or even meet because we're not in the same circles. But and then engage them. And then in this third place that's created, um, like understand what they do and then still help them, even if writing about the thing is like jarring, but it's still an interesting exercise. I actually love when that happens just because it puts me beyond my comfort zone, but it still shows that my process can work with any type of concept.
Yeah, no, and also it shows your professionalism.
Yeah,
I did
that's easy. I
have
mean, they're paying me.
yeah, I know. I always tell people, like, it's so funny whenever I'm, like, babysitting my cousins or dealing with other kids, I have, like, 0 patience, but once you pay me to teach them English, I'm, like, so patient because they're paying me. But to wrap this up, I wanted to ask some of your tips on resume, some general tips on resume writing or LinkedIn, because we have spoken about LinkedIn a lot. And I think I'm I'm not sure your opinion, but I feel like LinkedIn's where it's at. And I had been sleeping on LinkedIn for so long.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so LinkedIn, basically, people just don't like it because they view it as an extension again of the system, but it's really important to be on there, to have it as an app on your phone, to check it often, to basically have your profile set up like with the best picture you have, with the banner image, to make sure every area is filled out, you have 500 plus connections, that you're engaged, that you follow all the companies in the industry you want to work in, and that anytime you post on there, like, oh, I'm looking for a job, you make it so clear how you want to be helped. A story I like to tell is that I got that first job at IE Business School after I did grad school in Paris, because at IE Business School and any other company, if it's small and of all sizes, but specifically small ones, you go to their company page and there's a number of, oh, this place has 5,000 to 10,000 employees. You actually click on that number and it appears a list of all of those employees. Okay. So I looked at that list of all of the employees and I was just looking, does anyone on here have an American name? So in marketing specifically. So I was being
Mhm.
considered for a job anyway. So I was being considered for a job, but I was doing my research. So I look at the list of all the employees and I click on the one woman on marketing with an American looking name. But then I had this like road to Damascus moment where I click on her profile, then it immediately says, she went to your same undergrad school in America, the one that is the reason why I graduated at 20, which is a cool shared
Oh.
experience. So she was 8 years ahead of me. And then I reached out to her and I said, hey, like, what a coincidence. We're both immigrants in Madrid. I'm actually being considered for a job kind of on your team. So, like, let's talk. And 20 minutes later, we're on the phone. She's giving me all the information I need. And so, like, and then she put in a good word for me. And then it expedited me getting that job. And I'm sure that that factor of networking like made all the difference for a competitive job like that.
Honestly, I think like a lot of people kind of like view LinkedIn as a little cringe and they get a little embarrassed for posting because like basically LinkedIn, you have to like brag about yourself a bit to like your connections or at
You have
least
to do it in a
highlight.
tasteful way, but you have to be comfortable doing it. And
Yeah.
there's a way to do it being funny and also embracing that it's cringe, which is why Jason, the guy I mentioned earlier, really thrives on there. Like he has like a series that's like, oh, if these brands were all together, this is what they would talk about. And then it just things like that, just playful and silly. I mean, my videos, I really like sharing them on there because it's easy to stand out because nobody's doing anything like that of making like playful content with character and personality. Like all of my competitors are, I don't consider any of them even actual competitors because they're not doing this in real time and they're boring. Like I mean, I'm not trying to badmouth them, but they just don't engage in a way that stands out. And even all of them, sometimes they even post word for word the exact same templates to promote themselves. So it's just hard to take, like it's hard for them, but it's easy for me because I'm just using some character on there. So I recommend everyone like overcome the view that it's cringe, play with it, like be shameless. Like if you see someone that could like, here's how I'll frame it. Okay. So nepotism. Before, it was the father-in-law giving the job to the son-in-law. Okay. And that was the chain of the nepotism. LinkedIn makes it open source. So anyone can help anyone. So here's an example you might like. So similar to my thing of looking for the American on the list, I had a client who was from the Philippines, but living in the UK, and she worked in food science, but with a specific type of food science that there was only 3 companies in the UK that worked in that area. So I just told her, look at the list of all of the employees and try to find anyone else from the Philippines who can talk to you.
Yeah. I feel
Wait,
like
I have
that's
another.
something.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, I feel like that's something I do as well. I always check who's working at the company. If I ever see like this was posted by X person on HR, I add them, even if I don't message them, just so like maybe they see my name and hopefully it'll like ring a bell in the application process. But I was also curious because you did mention IE Business School and getting a master's. And I mentioned this a bit in the episode with my grandma. But how important do you think a master's or higher education is to getting a job in this job market right now?
I would not tell someone to go back to school just if unless they have a clear vision of how it would help them get where they want to go. I think if anything, just learning the skills online because school is expensive. I never want people to take debt for for this. Yeah. Wait, I actually, before we sign off, I do want to list out a few more interesting
Yes, of
stories really quickly.
course.
All right.
Please.
So I had a country music star as a client. I had a C-level figure at one of the household name dating apps as a client. And he lives in Porto also. And he got a better job than that. So
Wow.
let me think who else. Country
Would you ever
music
have to
star.
sign in? Would you ever have to sign an NDA? Or
They honestly, as some of the cases, I'm not saying the companies, so I don't have to sign the NDA because I'm not saying this person worked at
yeah.
this company, right? But I mean, a lot of them don't mind. And anyone who's ever written a review publicly about me, which I have 435 of, I can talk openly about those. But I am writing a coffee table book, release date to be determined, about
Woo woo.
all of the clients, not all of them, but about the ones that stands out in certain ways and then what I learned from them. So they're color coded based on like some are like here's one an example. I didn't even know this existed before. I had a client who was an urban planning expert and he knew the urban plans of Chicago and Hong Kong in and out. Okay. So he works in the entertainment industry so that anytime they film in Chicago or Hong Kong a blockbuster movie, he makes the plan of like, oh, we're going to make sure that the traffic and the urban plan isn't disrupted by setting up the trailers and shooting, and like how when you shoot a blockbuster movie, it's like a bunch of people running around.
Whoa.
So I didn't even know that existed as a
Me
career pathway
neither.
for people with urban planning. So like that's one of the categories of the book. Like a client comes to me, I didn't even know their job existed, then writing about it. And then there's the category of like the people whose jobs made me feel a little bit like the thing about the group of the lobbyists and the things that they support. Then there's also, this is the most important bit, I used to be super depressed when I was younger because I thought that the world was only getting worse. And obviously, it's really bad and the news is really bad. But from this being my job, I've had so many clients who are fully committed to making the world a better place and that their jobs are
That's great.
humanitarian development organizations. That I've helped like 20 people at the World Health Organization who all worked on defeating polio in Africa. And then when the polio was
Wow.
eradicated, they all needed new jobs. So the first one came to me and then connected me with the rest. They all are working out of Brazzaville. Then
Wow.
I had one woman who was just very involved in humanitarian aid in conflict zones kind of recently, and I really felt for her. And so all these people are solving these problems. Then even other people, like those are glamorous problems, but a lot of people dedicate their careers to solving things that are not glamorous, that the news would never report on. And
Mm-hmm.
that also like is beautiful. So I see that the people are just trying their best and they're literally dedicating their careers, which is what you do most of your time, to like making the world a better place. So that has made it easier for me to feel more, even though the world still, the headlines are really bad all the time, to make me optimistic about the future because I'm meeting these people from every area of life and like in almost every country in this third space where all of them just want the same thing, which is to improve their situation a little bit from talking with me. So I don't know. I feel good
That
about that.
that makes me feel good. Like it's just I honestly would love to be a fly in the wall in one of your like top 12 client dinner parties and just
Um,
like see what's going on.
Whenever I have friends stay with me, the guest area is in the same area as where I work. So they'll listen to just my parts of the call and see my work sona. And it's always really like entertaining for them. I like sharing this part of my life with friends, having them as the client, or just having them see me in action because I don't know, like it helps them understand me better. And then I in turn, when I have friends as clients, which also happens all the time,
Mhm.
I understand them better.
Well, that's amazing. And I wanted to say thank you so much for sharing all of your experience, some of your tips. I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge. If anyone is listening to this and you're thinking about a career change, or you just need to update your resume, or you're looking for a job, I cannot recommend Dan the Resume Man, aka Daniel Catalan, more because he is so professional. He has a wealth of knowledge, and the way you just have a way with words that I could never eloquently describe what I do the way you have. So I want to say thank you so much for being on this podcast. Thank you so much for helping me find my job. And if you guys enjoyed this podcast, make sure to follow Daniel Catalan on all of his socials, as well as the Comfort Zone on Instagram, my TikTok, and subscribe on YouTube and all of the podcasting platforms. So thank you again, Dan.
That was so much
And
fun. Thank you. You're amazing.
no, thank you. And I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Ciao.